Good afternoon, everyone. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Kevin Dunn. Grateful to be here sober with you this afternoon. And my brother Terrence asked me to record my story, so that's what I'm doing. And a couple of housekeeping points. My sobriety date is January 16th, 2000. It's my mother's birthday, so I'll never forget it. My home group is the TGIF group here in Charlotte. We meet on Friday and Monday mornings at 10 a.m. It's the best home group here in Charlotte because we give out a visitor's chip to anybody visiting from out of town, so they'll remember the meeting and know where to come if they ever come back into town. We try to be welcoming. We stick with the traditions, and we keep a greeter and a coffee maker and a secretary positions every month. So I just love my home group, and I lead a big book study there. I have the intergroup service rep position. I've had that for a few years now, and at intergroup I served as the nominations and outreach committee chair. So I'm very involved in Alcoholics Anonymous at the community level. I think that's what the soul craves more than anything else, is community, and I'm grateful for that from Alcoholics Anonymous. Before I get into the background of my story, I always like to say that one of the things that I benefited from getting sober in New Jersey is on Fridays we would jump into a car, 4 or 5 of us. We'd go into New York City, go to GSO World headquarters, and sit in the archive rooms for a couple of hours and pore over the original manuscripts and get to meet the people in the big book. It put flesh on the program, and it's what really made me passionate about working with others, and these people were real. And so whenever I take somebody through the big book, I always like to add the color and the history of the people and a little backstories and things like that. It makes it a more interesting read. I was the second of 8 kids, Irish Catholic, no TV, and as the second, I was the rebellious one, and kind of felt like the black sheep of the family. So if you're hearing this today and you're feeling like the black sheep of your family, welcome to the herd. Here we are. This is where we end up, and it's nice to feel a part of, and it's nice to feel I'm home. And I got that feeling the moment I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. There were 6 boys and 2 girls, so I always competed for time, for attention, for food, sports. It didn't really matter. Life was a competition from the day I was born, and I took up the game of golf at the age of 6 because I figured I could get my dad's attention undivided for 4 hours if I learned to play golf and go out with him. And it turned out I had some skills, and I played competitively until about 14 years old. I didn't like the kids that played competitive golf. A lot of them were rich kids that disrespected their equipment, and disrespected the course, and cheated. But I worked hard for my clubs. I caddied, and I ended up buying my set off of my teaching pro, and took very good care of them. I mean, I learned the etiquette of the game first, but it served me well. Like I said, until about the age of 14, where I found alcohol and girls. And I started to lose interest in playing. I knew alcohol, was an important part of my life from the age of 14 on. And, growing up in an alcoholic family, my dad was a violent alcoholic. And I was intimidated as a child, and I learned to use intimidation to get what I wanted. I had people feared me. And I liked that. It kind of made me feel powerful. We had a reputation in town: don't mess with the Dunns, because you mess with one of us, you're gonna have to mess with all of us. And we were serious about that. So I sort of protected that reputation as I got older, and a lot of the foundational behaviors of my personality were formed very young. We were taught to be independent and self-sufficient. do unto others before they do unto you. Don't trust anybody. They're all out to get you. And don't let anybody get close to you. That way you can't get hurt. And those are my beliefs growing up. And, and I found it to be, it was like a security blanket to live like that. It got what I wanted out of life until it didn't. But there's a story in the back of the fourth edition of the big book called The Window of Opportunity. It's not a long story. It's a young kid. But it has a line in it that really nails me. And it says that a normal drinker will change his behavior to match his goals, but an alcoholic will change his goals to match his behavior. And towards the end of my drinking, that's what I was doing. I was compromising away my life to protect that drink. And I didn't even realize what I was doing. The good news about alcoholism is if you've got it, you brought it in here with you. You can't catch it from us. The bad news about alcoholism is if you've got it, it's chronic, which means it never goes away, never. It's progressive, which means it always gets worse. It never gets better. And it's fatal. It kills people. And I've been around long enough to have buried quite a few people that really wanted this program, but died anyway. And, they say this is not a program for people who need it. If it was, we'd be meeting in stadiums around the country and around the world. If it was a program for people who want it, again, we have a lot of people in attendance, but a lot of people show up for relief rather than recovery. They're running from something or hiding from something, and I was one of those guys in the beginning. It's for people who do it, and taking direction from another man was a difficult thing for me to swallow and accept because I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I had to learn to swallow my pride, and take direction. If this thing was ever gonna have a chance of taking an effect. See, I firmly believe that God doesn't care if I drink or not. He just cares. And until I cared too, recovery was going to remain elusive. I showed up in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the most honest thing I could admit was I got a problem that I can't fix. And I don't even know what the problem is. It can't be alcohol because that was the only thing that I thought was working in my life. It just numbed me and took away the pain or the problem that I happened to be dealing with in the moment, but it was getting shorter and shorter in terms of duration. And I struggled with that because I was confused, and that's why they spend so much time. They spend, the first 3 chapters and the doctor's opinion in the big book describing the problem. Bill's an interesting writer. He's very military in his approach. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So he will say the same thing over and over again with different wording and different phrases, but the same point. And I had to understand what the problem was. In the doctor's opinion, it says that we drink for the effect. I love the effect produced by alcohol. Calgon, take me away. It worked until it didn't. So we drink until we can no longer take it. Something's going to make us stop. The pain of the pain, a medical issue, a legal issue, a family member, a boss. Something's going to make me stop. And I thought that my life would be roses once I put the plug in the jug and stopped drinking. What I experienced was that my life got immeasurably worse real fast once I stopped drinking. Because I lost my go-to solution, my crutch. And so what happens is the second problem appears. As Dr. Silkworth describes it, we're restless, irritable, and discontent by nature. I don't like who I am. I'm uncomfortable in my own skin. And so I drink until I can no longer take it, and then I don't drink until I can no longer take it. And it goes on to say that the only thing that can change this pattern of behavior is a spiritual experience. I had no clue what a spiritual experience was. My sponsor made it real simple for me and said, Kevin, you either change the way you react to life or you change your sobriety date. And I proved him right about a half a dozen times in succession. I got 90 days, 6 times. Couldn't get 91 because I set my mind on a goal of 90 days. I'd come home, I'd slap that pin down on the kitchen table and say, see, I can do this. And my wife at the time would say, well, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And I would get annoyed that she wasn't giving me credit for my sobriety. And I'll show her, I'll hurt me. And I would drink again. And it happened over and over. My first drink, I'm not going to dwell too much on my drinking history because we all know how to get drunk. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. I want to focus more on the steps and on the process of recovery. But my first drink was a Common Tail, 14 years old, summer vacation. Got a place up in the Poconos. My cousins were in town from Michigan, and I had systematically stolen a little bit of everything out of my father's liquor cabinet and put it in a Tupperware container. And my sister Kathleen, my cousin Peggy, and I went for a walk in the woods. And I cracked this thing open. My sister took a sip and spit it out. My cousin Peggy took a sip and spit it out. And I worked real hard to collect all that alcohol. So I wasn't going to let it go to waste, so I drank the whole thing. And walking back to the house, I'm getting the whirlies, and I'm stumbling and falling down and laughing. And, you know, the girls are just like shocked to see me behaving like this. And we get to the front door, open up the door, I fall in flat on my face and throw up on the living room rug. And my mother is crying, and my father is patting me on the back saying, now you're a man. And I thought, what a strange way to get my dad's attention and, and his approval. But that was the first time I felt it. You see, like I said, he was a violent alcoholic, and, and he intimidated me. But I learned to use that intimidation to get what I wanted out of life. I thought if it was working for him, it could work for me. But at the end of my drinking, I was hawking my wife's jewelry, and I rationalized it by saying I only hawked the stuff that I bought her. I didn't hawk her family heirlooms and things like that. So I was justified in taking her jewelry and taking it to the pawn shop and getting some money to get what I needed. And she caught me. And we were in this nasty argument. I assume it was about the jewelry because I don't really remember what the argument was about, but I know it was heated. And at one point she reached across the kitchen table and slapped me in the face, and I was shocked. And I just paused for a moment. I had that moment of clarity, and I said, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to bait me into hitting you so that you can call the cops and have me arrested. Well, watch this. And I reached over and I picked up the phone and I called the cops, and they showed up, and it didn't take them 10 seconds to figure out who the sick person in the room was, and they arrested me. And they took me off to jail 4th of July weekend, and my wife took the kids out to Pennsylvania to her family's house. And as they were walking me back to a jail cell, I came across my image in the mirror. I hadn't been looking in the mirror for a long time. I didn't even look in the mirror to shave because I was so ashamed of who I was. I was uncomfortable with who I was. And so I really didn't spend any time looking in mirrors. And when I caught a glimpse of myself, I didn't recognize me. And I said, how did I ever get here? And I need help. I'm looking at myself and I'm looking withered and desperate. And when I got bailed out of jail a couple days later, I called my brother Terrence and asked him for some help. And he and a couple of his buddies, showed up in a car and took me to my very first AA meeting. That was 1990. It was going to take me another 10 years to actually give this thing an honest try and get sober. But it was the start. It was the sowing of that seed. When I walked in to that meeting and they all greeted me, I felt at home. I felt loved. I felt welcomed, and it was a unique feeling because I wasn't really welcomed anywhere at that point in time in my life. But I fell in love with AA because where else are you going to go to get a round of applause for screwing up your life? And that's the honest truth. It felt good, but I was there for relief and not recovery. I wanted my wife off my back. I wanted the law off my back. I wanted my boss off my back. And if I have to stop drinking for a little while, I'm going to try this. Didn't want to listen to anybody. Didn't want to take any direction. And I really didn't want to stop drinking. But I thought I could fool them, And I didn't have a driver's license at the time. I was commuting in and out of Manhattan, and so these guys would show up at the train station to give me a ride home, and they knew I was drunk coming off that train, getting in their car. They could smell it, and I'd say, "Can you just take me home?" And they go, "Yeah, we're going to get you home. We're just going to swing by the meeting." "Oh man, not the meeting again." And I said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you home." And they would take me to the meeting. They'd tell me to sit down and shut up. And then they would talk about me as if I wasn't even in the room. "I want to thank the man who came in here with booze on his breath tonight because he's keeping me sober." And I'm looking around like, who would do something like that? And of course it was me. I mean, I was so shocked that I was the guy that he was talking about. I subscribe to what I call the George Costanza theory of the truth. It's not a lie if you believe it. And I would go out of my way to believe the crap that I was trying to get you to buy, to get out of my face. I was the consummate poser. I could be a chameleon. I could be whoever you needed me to be in the moment. And 2 minutes later, I couldn't remember what I said to you, what we were even talking about. As long as you got out of my face. And, it was just an uncomfortable place to be, but I had nowhere else to go. And didn't have a driver's license, so I was kind of stuck with these guys. And they kept telling me, "Bring the body and the mind will follow." And eventually it did. But boy, I'll tell you, it took a lot to wear me down. That first step really came to light. I sort of got tricked into getting sober. I was coming back to a meeting, so I put my hand up, said I'm coming back for like the 19th time. I was so tired of this routine and embarrassed to be putting my hand up again and hanging my head. And I heard this guy from across the room shout out, "Why don't you stop coming around?" Well, that got my attention. And I was a get in your face kind of guy, but I sort of just took it. And I'm stewing it throughout the whole meeting. And at the end of the meeting, we're holding hands. And I got one eye open and I'm looking for this guy. And I make a beeline over to him and I said, "Who do you think you are telling me I'm not welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous? I thought the only requirement for membership was a desire to stop drinking, and I got that today." And he laughed, which pissed me off, and said, "Kevin, you've been coming around here for 5 years. Why don't you come in? Get a home group and take a commitment. Get some phone numbers and dial them. Don't file them. Let people get to know who you are. Get a sponsor and use them. Work the steps." These were all concepts I should have learned, as a child, and I had no idea what he was even talking about. They said, "Go on speaking commitments, but you don't know anything about recovery, so please don't speak. Learn how to be where you say you're going to be and do what you say you're going to do." And it just sort of chopped me down that, man, this guy can see right through me. He knew exactly how insecure I was. And I kind of liked the guy, and I jumped in his back pocket, and he saw my competitive nature, and he said, "I'll tell you what, Kevin, if you can come up with a good enough reason to drink, I'll buy." And I thought, okay, here we go, game on. I like this guy. I am going to figure out a way to get him to buy me a drink. And for the next 30 days, I called him every day at 10 o'clock in the morning with a different lame excuse why he should buy me a drink. And he would talk me down. He would shoot holes in everything that I told him and then say, "I'll talk to you tomorrow." And I said, "Okay, Jim, I'll give you a call in the morning." And I immediately started thinking about the next lame excuse I was going to try to come up with to get this guy to buy me a drink. So at the end of 30 days, I'm starting to tell him my latest lame excuse, and he starts laughing, which always aggravated me. And I said, "What's so funny?" He says, Kevin, if you put half the effort into your recovery that you put into getting me to buy you a drink, this process would be a breeze for you. And he was right, He says, your body is now detoxed from alcohol. So now your mind can absorb the program of recovery. Are you ready to work the steps? And it dawned on me that I hadn't had a drink in 30 days. Now, I wouldn't say that I didn't think about it, but I didn't have a drink in 30 days. And I said, all right. And Jim started me down that road. So that was, my first experience was about surrender. I had to first surrender to the bottle because I didn't really want to, but it was explained to me by going through the doctor's opinion and the first 3 chapters of the book that alcohol is poison to me. It's not poison to everybody. That's the cunning, baffling, and powerful part, but it's poison to me. So I am slowly killing myself by taking alcohol and using it as a substitute for proper nutrition. I'm not getting any exercise except running to the dope man or the liquor store. And I'm not getting any sleep. I'm passing out and coming to. I'm not falling asleep. So I have screwed up my nervous system. I poisoned it, which poisons my mind. And now I can't make a rational decision. And so I stay stuck in this lying mode of telling you what I think you want to hear to get out of my face. Once I realize that alcohol is poison to me, I have to see the skull and crossbones on the bottle before I pick it up. If I don't see the skull and crossbones, I am going to consider it a beverage, and I'm going to try to use it as a beverage to refresh me, like I always do, and it's going to treat me exactly the way it always did. And the consequences were getting worse and worse and worse. Something had to change. So that was my first step experience, was understanding what the problem was and making that surrender. First surrendering to the bottle. Then I got to surrender to another man. Then I got to surrender to God. Oh my word, that's a problem for me. And then I got to surrender to my character defects. How's that ever going to happen? And as I've stayed sober, the longer I stay sober, the more I realize more surrender will be required. Life shows up. It shows up for all of us. And if I'm not spiritually fit, I'm not going to be able to deal with it on a daily basis. So all that stuff went into that first step for me. And it launched me on a path of recovery that I am forever grateful for. The second step for me is where I think the linchpin of this whole program is, because how do you come to believe in a power greater than yourself that could restore you to sanity if you don't feel worthy, if you don't feel lovable, if you don't feel forgiven? See, I was a kid who got kicked out of the Catholic school in the 5th grade for hitting a nun. Now, she hit me first, but it really didn't matter. They ushered me off the grounds that day and said, "There's no hope for you, boy. You're going to hell." And I believed them. And I behaved that way for the next 35 plus years of my life. It caused me to have a problem with authority all my life. And based on that belief. And so I struggled with this primarily because I had surrounded myself with birds of a feather, people who behaved exactly the way I did. There was nobody in my circle that was ever going to call me out on my behavior because we were all doing exactly the same thing. We had created this polarized existence of us versus them. We were the cool kids and they were the jerks. We knew it all and they didn't know anything. And it distanced me from other people. And it distanced me from God. Because of that experience with the nuns, my relationship with God was, I could sum it up as God. I kept God in a glass box that said, "Break glass in case of emergency." All right? And my pride and my ego would not allow me to break that glass, mostly out of self-centered fear. Fear that once I asked God for help with my petty problem, how am I going to get him back in the box? Now, shame on me that I thought I could keep God in a box, but that's where I was when I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, here's the spoiler alert. It's not them. It's me. And I had to stop blaming other people and other situations for my lot in life and take responsibility. I had to stop saying no to things I never tried and stop saying, yeah, but. And I did a lot of that. Then I had to find that one guy that I could trust with all of my secrets. I mean, all of them. And, and then I had to faithfully follow the process, the steps, in order to have a shot at recovery. But at that point, I need to strap in for the ride of my life, because faith is an after the fact statement. It comes after I've weathered a few storms. I can believe all I want. I can believe that you believe. I can say I believe in God, but I think that God doesn't believe in me. All that stuff. I can rationalize my way. But I have to weather a few storms in order to develop faith. Faith is experiential. Experience-based. And, and today I have a strong faith because I've seen the hand of God working in my life. There's a lot of times where I threw up my hands and said, I would have never picked this as your will for me today, God, but if this is it, let me see what you can do with it, because I got nothing, So the second step, how do you feel worthy and lovable and forgiven? Well, AA taught me to flip the glasses around, and I was living life as a taker, and he taught me that you get what you give. If you want love, you got to give it. If you want compassion, you've got to give it. If you want forgiveness, you've got to give it. And why don't you start with your old man? I came to realize that he was doing the best he could with what he had, the way he was raised. He was full of fear. He operated trying to raise a family of 8, put food on the table for 10 people every night as a self-employed person. And I'm sure he was scared. And he was drinking hard to sort of mask those feelings. And he took it out on us. And, I can look back and today and say, I forgive him. But forgiveness doesn't let the other person off the hook. It lets me off the hook. It gives me a shot at some kind of peace and serenity in my life, because I don't have to drag that around with me. So the third step shows up where I'm now realizing just how hard I was hanging on to try to control my environment and the people around me. I was a manipulator. Like I said, I was the consummate poser. My superpower was I could look you dead in the eye and tell you exactly what you need to hear to get out of my face. And I was doing that. And my sponsor gave me a God box. It's just a box with a circle and a triangle on the top of it and a G-O-D on it. And anytime I had an issue that I couldn't figure out, he told me to write it down on a piece of paper and stick it in the box and let it go. It was a tangible way of learning how to let go. But the real purpose of the God box was to teach me to start writing. Because when we talk about things, we talk about things. But when we write about them, we own them. And so I was beginning the process of getting ready for the fourth step, and I didn't even know it. He was having me write this stuff out. And I kept peeking back in the box and, you got to take care of this. At the end of the month, you open up the box, you take out all the papers that are in there, and you read through them again, and you realize, that the stuff that was eating my lunch in the moment was really insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And it helped me to gain a new perspective on issues in my life. I was operating on my feelings, and feelings aren't facts. They pass. And so it taught me, how to stay in the moment and wait to worry, not get overly caught up in that stuff. But I still struggled with control. And the third step came to a head for me when my mother was dying. She had moved down to Carolina Beach, North Carolina, and she contracted lung cancer. And she dragged that oxygen tank around with her for almost 2 years. But towards the end, she was dying, and she was in and out of a coma. I had thrown myself into my work, And I had convinced myself that if I don't go to see her, she can't die. In the meantime, my sister is calling me up on a daily basis. You got to come down and say goodbye. You'll regret it the rest of your life if you don't. And I just kept pushing back and making excuses and not wanting to go. It took my brother Terrence to get on a plane from Wilmington, fly back up to Newark to get me on the plane to go down there. And I was the neon was so bright in that airport, and I had a pocket full of change, and I was stopping at every one of those phone banks, and I'm calling my sponsor, do I really need to do this? And he says, you'll regret it for the rest of your life if you don't. And I made my way down with my brother's help to the gate, onto the plane, and we got down to North Carolina, and I walked into my mother's house. My mother was a nurse. She had a caregiver all her life. And she was in a coma, and I reached over and I grabbed her hand and squeezed it, and she opened her eyes and she looked at me and she smiled. And she said, did you get enough to eat? Now here she is on her deathbed, worrying if I got enough to eat. And I said, look at me, Mom, do I look like I missed many meals? And she laughed, and she said, you could always make me laugh. And then I got the opportunity to tell her that it's okay to go to God, that I'm gonna be fine. Don't worry about me. It's time to let go. And within 15 minutes, she passed away. And it was so hard at the time, but it was also so cathartic to learn that God is in control. And she was finally out of her pain. I felt so much guilt about making her wait to say goodbye to me. She probably suffered a little bit longer than she needed to because of my selfishness and my self-centeredness. And it's a living amends I make every day to my mother to be a better man than I was back then. The funny thing was that my father had gotten sober. He was about 5 years sober when she passed. And I thought for sure he was going to drink. And I watched him like a hawk. Because if he was going to drink, I was going to drink with him. And then I saw what I needed to see that was going to carry me to this day with a servant's heart. And his best friend showed up at the house drunk. And I watched my father quietly put his arm around that man, walk him out to the back screened-in porch, light up a cigarette, and 12-step him. I sat with my back to that screen, listening to him 12-step this guy. And on the day his wife dies, this is what you do when your world falls apart. Turn your thoughts to helping somebody else. I can't explain how it works. I call it God's economy. Take care of your brother and sister, and I'll take care of you. It's been my experience that has been true. Anytime I focus on my problems, they magnify. Anytime I focus on helping somebody else, my problems get magically addressed. It's a miracle, but it's the hand of God working in my life. That again, the soul craves community, and He wants us to all get along. So I needed that lesson, and I witnessed that day. That's carried me to this day, where I sponsor 7 guys, 8 guys, something like that. Sit with somebody different every day, and we're in 5 different books, and I'm always getting confused. But every day, my thoughts are, how can I be of service to somebody less fortunate than myself? And it's part of my prayer routine, and God delivers on a daily basis the opportunity to be of service, because I'm looking for it. So we get to that 4th step as I come back from that experience with my mother, and I said to Jim, I said, Jim, do I really need to do this? Write this stuff down? You know me. And he says, well, that's the purpose of this step. I don't know you. Your words and your actions never seem to line up. I don't know who you are, but we're gonna find out together. And he said, the wound may not be your fault, but the healing becomes your responsibility. And what he was talking about was the stuff that I thought in my childhood that wasn't my fault. How can I reconcile this resentment? And he said, well, what's your part in it? Your part in something like that is you're still carrying it around as a grown adult. It's your rock. You pull it out of your pocket, you show it off like a badge of honor, you talk about it negatively, and never seem to let it go. You put it back in your pocket. You got to learn to drop the rock. And that's when he talked to me about forgiveness. And then he said something really profound to me. He said, Kevin, God's never going to heal the man you're pretending to be. So why don't you just try to be authentic? Put it all down, everything. And if there's a name for it, somebody else has already felt it. So you're not that special. And he kept chipping away at me because I thought I was some kind of special guy, that God saved me, so I could save the world. And I had a savior complex. And he also told me, he says, we're not in the saving business, Kevin. We're in the loving business. God takes care of the saving. Just love on them. You have no idea what somebody else is going through. So when they're acting out and coming at you, consider it flattering. Because thieves don't rob empty houses. The enemy values you for some reason. And that's why these people seem to be coming at you. They're just projecting their fear onto you. And it's not an invitation to project the fear back onto them. Wow, kind of blew me away. And I started chiseling away at that fourth step. And I got everything out on the paper. He sort of summarized it this way. He says, Kevin, there are facts in your life that you can't change. Events that happened. That create a belief system. All right? That generate your behavior and deliver a consequence. If you want any of that stuff to change, you're going to have to take a hard look at the belief, the behavior, or the consequence and try to change one of those things because you can't change the events. I'll use as an example, getting kicked out of the Catholic school. All right? The nuns told me I was going to hell. Created a belief that I was worthless to God, that God stopped believing in me. So my attitude was, what's the point? If I'm already going to hell, what's the point? And so I behaved like a heathen for the better part of my life. And I always had consequences with authority. It's funny how that works. So I had to go back and revisit that belief system and convince myself that it was based on a lie, that it wasn't the truth, that I'm not going to hell, that they don't know. They just had enough of me. And I gave them plenty of reasons to say something like that to me. But, it's not fair to have God judge me as a 12-year-old boy for the rest of my life. And so I learned to forgive myself. And that self-forgiveness opens the door to ask for forgiveness from other people. In the fifth step, and I'm actually going to share this now with my sponsor, and it's some of the stuff is embarrassing. You feel like, I don't really want to talk about this. And he always said, let's start with the thing you were planning to take to your grave. It's probably not on that paper. I go, what? This guy saw right through me. And he took me through it in a very thorough fashion and made me realize that these are things I did under the influence. It's not who I am. The process is getting to know who you are and whose you are. And Mother Teresa put it this way: nothing can touch you, neither praise nor disgrace, when you know who you are and whose you are. And that has never been so true for me. Today I know that I'm a child of God. I am lovable. I am worthy. And I am forgiven. And I use that mantra when I meditate before I begin my prayer routine, because it reminds me, I wake up and I sit on the edge of my bed and I recite the enemy's mission statement. Kill, steal, and destroy everything in your life. That's what's waiting for you when you walk out the door, Kevin. What are you going to do about it? And that reminds me to open my hands and to repeat that I am worthy, that I am loved, that I am a child of God, and that I am forgiven. And that puts my mind in a good place where I can receive the blessings that God has in store for me just for that day. Give us this day our daily bread. Not a week's worth, not a month's worth, just my daily bread. And I'm equipped to do battle with the day. So that really helped. The humility that it takes to be honest with another man makes honesty easier to face. And that's how you get to a place of self-forgiveness. But in the sixth step, willing to have God remove all these defects of character, right? God is such a gentleman. He's gonna make me ask. Every morning he shows up on my porch. He looks in the window and smiles and waves at me. He knocks on my door and I open it up just a crack and say, "What is it that you want?" He says, "I want to come into your living room." But it'll only come in by invitation. I have to invite him into my living room if I'm going to experience the presence of God in my life. And just like in the Bible where Jesus encounters a blind man, he knows he's blind, but he makes the guy ask, "What is it that you want?" He goes, "Well, I'm blind." I said, "Yeah, I can see that. What do you want?" He says, "I want my sight restored." And then he gets healed. But it wasn't until he asked. And it's the same thing with my character defects. If I don't acknowledge them, and if I don't ask God to remove them, he's a gentleman. He's not going to do it, So I get what I give. And it's another lesson. It's the same thing being said over and over again, just in a different way. And in the seventh step, I actually come into contact with my real self for the very first time. I recognize that I am a fallible human being. That perfectionism that I suffered from has to go out the window. Somewhere between confidence and arrogance, we find humility. And it's an inner feeling, which gives us humbleness, which is that outer balance, that outer behavior. And so, I really get to know who I am and whose I am and accept the fact that I'm not perfect. I'm okay with me, and God's okay with me. Life isn't about the stumble and fall. It's about how we get back up. Am I going to get back up this time? And am I going to learn the lesson, going forward? The eighth step is so important to have a sponsor, because I have this list of resentments that I have and things that I did. And I see my part in all of this stuff now, and I've got to prepare myself to go out and make amends. The word amends is interesting. It means to change the behavior. So you can't just go out and do it right away. There has to be a time that's gone by so that people can see that you've changed your behavior. And it's only then that an amends will feel and sound sincere. And so sponsor helps with the prioritizing of that list. Discarding the ones that I'm hanging on to that have no business being on the list, and recognizing what I need to prioritize. And the biggest amends that I needed to make, besides myself, was to my ex-wife. I had gaslit her for years, and I said I'm sorry a million times. But we had gotten to a point where after she asked me for a divorce and I ran away, I came down here to Charlotte. We didn't talk for 13 years, not a text, not a sentence or a word. And then my son was getting married. And I pulled her aside, when I saw her at the hotel. And I said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" She says, "What do you want?" Still angry, still hurt. And I said to her, I know I've said I'm sorry a million times, but I never asked you what it must have felt like to live with me in my addiction. And she said it sucked. And she went off for the next 5 minutes, recounting old events. Some I remembered, some I didn't. But this was the pain that she was carrying. And I needed to help her unburden herself and let her vent. And I just stood there and I took it. And then at the end, I just said, "I hope you can forgive me, but I was wrong." And today we have a wonderful relationship because I allowed her the grace to get over her past and let it go. You know, if you keep carrying the bricks of your past, you're going to rebuild the same house. And I needed to let it go, but I needed to give her the opportunity to let it go as well. And that was a real powerful amends. But it took 13 years of changed behavior for her to believe the sincerity of that amends. In the ninth, so that ninth step of unloading is just so valuable. In the 10th step, I have to continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear when they crop up, not if they crop up. Life shows up, like I said, and there's a thread that runs between those 4 words. You know, when I'm acting selfishly, I will eventually get dishonest because I want to protect the selfish behavior. That dishonesty is going to cause a resentment in me or in somebody else. And then I'm going to generate fear that I'm going to get found out. And so there's a connection to those words, and that's why they use them over and over and over again in the big book. My morning prayer is, clear my heart of any bitterness, anger, resentment, or fear so that your grace can flow into me and out to somebody else. You see, God's not even for me. He's for somebody else. And I get to go along for the ride if my own house is in order. So that hole in my soul that was there is there by design and not by defect. I wasn't cheated by God. My job is to keep it clear of any bitterness, anger, resentment, or fear so his grace can flow into me and out to somebody else. I think of us all as power strips. You find a power source, you plug in, the light goes on, but unless you have other people plugged into your life, you're just laying on the floor useless. So today I am a power strip. I'm a conduit for God's love and grace, and I need to share it with other people if I'm going to benefit from it. I can't keep it to myself. It's like holding your breath. Eventually you will pass out and die. You have to let the breath out. And so that's, what I've learned from that 10th step. And today, as I go through my day and I'm not making as many mistakes as I used to, but I am missing opportunities. And I ask God, where did I miss it, God? Where was I so self-absorbed that I didn't see the person that you put in front of me that needed help? And I was equipped to help them, and I ignored it. That's the behavior that I look for on a daily basis. And I don't compete with other people anymore. I compete with myself yesterday. I want to be a better man tomorrow than I am today. And I keep that sort of mantra going as long as I can. Which takes me to the 11th step. You want to keep this thing? You want to keep it for a long time? It takes work. It takes prayer and meditation. I need to have that routine of prayer and meditation in my life, and I do it on a daily basis. I don't miss. There's 3 things that happen when you pray. I always thought, if all the bad stuff's going to happen anyway, why pray, right? And it was explained to me that 3 things happen when you pray. The first thing is that you realize you need God. God doesn't need you. If you don't believe me, pick up a newspaper and look at the obituaries and see all the people God didn't need to get the job done today. All right? He don't need me, but I need him. Second thing that happens is it makes this hostile, cruel world a little more tolerable. Life is harsh, and it's going to come at me. I have to be spiritually fit in order to deal with it. I have to be strapped in to accept life as the journey that it is and not the journey that I want. All right? And when I live in gratitude, I can do that a lot easier. So every morning with my guys, we exchange a gratitude list of 3 things that we're grateful for that particular day. And we can repeat, but it's a great exercise that gets me started in my day in an attitude of gratitude. That gives me serenity and peace that carries me probably until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I got to get my butt to a meeting. To hear some fresh pain. To remember, that I'm an arm's length and 12 steps away from a drink. That's it. And so I need to keep this up all the time. And in the 12th step, this is the place where a lot of people sort of miss it. They think what can I get out of this program? I want to get to the steps. I want to check the box. The steps aren't mechanical, they're spiritual. If they were mechanical, we could all take the test and go home, but they're spiritual. And so I don't know what life's going to throw at me tomorrow, all right? Even today. I just have to be able to deal with it one day at a time. And so, I have to be intentional about what I'm looking for. I had a guy I sponsored years ago. His name was Ralph, and he was just like me, argumentative, and just belligerently pushed back on everything I asked him to do. And that was me. So I recognized this guy. I know why God put him in my life. And so I said to him, one day I said, "Hey, Ralph, do me a favor. Just for this week, I want you to count how many red Jeep Cherokees you find on the road and report to me on Friday how many you found." And his immediate response was, "I worked for Jeep. They don't make it in red." I said, "Can you just do the exercise?" 0 is an acceptable answer. He said, "All right." So Friday comes along. He calls me up and says, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, but I found 2 red Jeep Cherokees this week. I'm sure they were aftermarket paint jobs because they don't make it in red." I go, "Oh my God." Guy's sticking to this story. And he said, "What was the purpose of that exercise?" And I said, "Ralph, if you're intentional about what you're looking for, you're going to find it. If you're looking for an excuse, you're going to find it. If you're looking for recovery, you're going to find it. Be intentional about what you're looking for." Now, I never heard from Ralph again. I heard he moved away to Florida someplace or what have you, but I'm hoping that seed that I planted took, because that's our job, is to sow the seeds. We don't necessarily get to fertilize them, water them, or even harvest them. We just sow them. And, sometimes those seeds are going to fall on the hard path and get eaten up by the birds. Sow them anyway. Sometimes those seeds are going to fall into thorny bushes and get choked off by bitterness, anger, resentment, or fear. Sow them anyway. Sometimes those seeds are going to fall into the ground, but it's not very fertile ground. It's firm ground. And so they will flower, but they won't root deeply. So when the winds of life come blowing, they get knocked over and die. Every now and then you find that guy that is as desperate as you are for recovery, to be content, to be happy, joyous, and free. When I found that in the big book, that was my goal. I was pursuing that. That's fertile soil. That's a well-tilled garden where the roots can grow deep and they can take a stronghold and nothing is going to blow them over or take them out. So it's rare, but that's the real joy of working with others. I have a passion for working with people. I love doing it. I think that it's it's one of my gifts. I'm a good communicator. And I try to break things down real easy, and I'm grateful for that. The combination of self-examination, prayer, and meditation can provide you with an unshakable foundation for your future if you give this thing an honest try. And today I can do that. 3 years ago I got diagnosed with prostate cancer, and having both my parents die of lung cancer, I thought immediately death sentence. And then I heard God's voice say, "Stop wasting time." And I started thinking about mortality, and I started thinking about all the things that I wanted to accomplish. And I've been writing a daily meditation that I post on Facebook called My Prayer for You Today. And I compiled a book, and I self-published it. It's on Amazon, called My Prayer for You Today. And I finished the book, and I felt accomplished. And then I submitted my story for the 5th edition of the big book. And it got through the region, and it got to New York, but unfortunately it's not going to make it into the 5th edition. But what a legacy that would have been, to have my story printed in the big book. But I gave it a shot. It's interesting. And God put these 8 people in my life to keep me busy, so I wasn't thinking about me. And I got the cancer was caught early because of my diabetes. My diabetic doctor actually caught it early, and And I got a great team of doctors to treat me. We came up with an effective high-intensity treatment plan that worked. That along with my faith, because every day I would speak to my cancer, and I would tell it that he has no power, no authority over me. I'm a child of God, and as such, his master. So he must step off of my life and off of the lives of the people that I love. And it worked. And in December, I got the cancer-free diagnosis after the treatment was over. And in March, I got a body scan, and there's no sign of any cancer anywhere else in my body. And I feel truly blessed. And it's also that I could witness for God, his power and his glory, if I give it to him. I give all the credit to God, because I really had nothing to do with this. I put my body in that condition to be susceptible to this, but I refused to relinquish to it, and I stood on my faith. And I think that that's a powerful thing. If you want long-term contented sobriety, there's a couple of things you got to do. You got to do hard things. Getting sober and staying sober is hard. You got to do it for decades. It doesn't happen overnight. I hear people with 2 years saying, oh, I should know better than that. Well, I honestly don't know any 2-year-olds that have their act together. So stop being so hard on yourself and just continue on the process. Now the work begins, and so do it for decades, do hard things, do it for decades, and write your story and live your story. And today I'm the hero of my story, and I'm grateful to be here sober with you. Thanks for listening.